this ASPIKA talk, I'm going to be talking about drowning. And this is something that every single person needs to have information about. In 2021, 300,000 people across the globe died from drowning. And there's an estimate that for every person who dies from drowning, 8 have a drowning experience, but they survive. So drowning is an enormous obstacle that so many people face. And of those 300,000, a quarter of them were under the age of 5. Drowning is a huge issue for children in general, but when it comes to children with autism, they drown at a rate 160 times greater than those who are typically developing. So if you are a family member of a child with autism, I cannot encourage you enough to seek out drowning prevention strategies. And yes, that does include swimming lessons. And I realize that there are parts of this world where swimming lessons are not so easily found. So I get that. Especially swimming lessons where you as a family feel welcome. I talk to so many families of children with autism, and they say that they go to their local place where all the kids from the area go for swimming lessons. But they get there and their child isn't necessarily welcome into that environment. And a lot of times that's because it's very overwhelming. I know when I was a kid, swimming lessons, I was in a pool with probably 100 kids in the swimming pool. My son would not have been able to get into that pool. He needed to have one-on-one lessons. And that's true for a lot of kids with autism, especially when they're young and they're just developing. You know, they haven't yet acclimated to those large, loud environments. And in case you didn't know this, sound actually travels on water. So even when it might sound noisy in a playground, times that times 10, and that's what you get during a swimming lesson when that water, when the sound, let's see, when the voices are bouncing off the surface of the water. And then we also have whistles, right? Because lifeguards have whistles. So it's a very sensory environment, really overloading sometimes for people on the spectrum. So we want to make sure that we set them up for success by finding that. Let me get back to the kids with autism. You know, we know that statistic. It was some research that came out of Columbia University in California that we know that they drown 160 times greater than typically developing kids. But the other thing is that's just based on what we know. And if we look at our overall numbers of drowning in children, most children drown under the age of 3. So 3 and younger. If we just look at numbers, full numbers. But when we look at autism, those numbers compound significantly beyond the age of that, so 4 and up. Just in the state where I live, so that's the state of Florida, last year, we had 105 children who died from drowning. If we look at those numbers, of those who were 4 and over, 60% of those children had autism and had that diagnosis. However, when we look at the younger ones, it's not as significant. And that is because, we believe, to a great degree, that it's because those children were yet not diagnosed. In case you weren't aware, the age of diagnosis continues to be, even with all the research that we have in this area, the average age of diagnosis of autism is still age 4.5. So we know, though, that there are physicians who can capture it earlier. My son, for instance, was 2.5. But he was 2.5, but that was after advocating for it because I knew something was up. He had had a few words, and then all of a sudden, there were no words that he was able to speak. He began exhibiting stereotypical autistic behavior, so hand flapping, pacing, lining up his toys. So he had those early signs, but yet I still had a physician was telling me to give it time. So it was my advocacy that really propelled his earlier diagnosis. So if I had waited, my son might have been that kid who was 4.5 or older before getting a diagnosis. But I knew the importance of early intervention and was unwilling to wait. So when we look at drowning, we know that our numbers are skewed because that experience that I had with Give It Time is still happening today. So our big question is, of all those young children who are dying from drowning, how many of them would have later been diagnosed with autism? And the reason that we really have that question front and center right now is because most children who drown They drown as a result of getting out of the home or getting away from their loved one undetected. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, I had many experiences where I would be doing something, turn for a second, and he was gone. And luckily, he was in the general area, so I was able to find him. But there is a statistic that says that people with autism, about 50% of them, between 48 and 50% of people with autism have a tendency to wander. However, I have never met one parent, and maybe it's you, but I've never met one parent who didn't say that they have had that experience where they turn for a minute. Maybe you're washing dishes, maybe you're cooking dinner, maybe you're out in the garden, and then you wonder, where is your child? Because they're extremely self-directed. And it's not to a fault, it's just that they don't really think that, oh, I should let mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, cousins, that I should let someone else know where I'm going or what I'm going to do. And the other caveat to that is they are extremely drawn to water. There is nothing else like water. There is no other experience that any of us can have that is similar to being in, and for most of us, enjoying the water. The way that light hits it and bounces off of it, the way that it responds to when you throw things in the water. When my son was young, we had a boat, and I don't know how many things we actually lost off of that boat, because he could often be found at the back of the boat going like this as he watched something go out of his hands and plunk into the ocean. And because he loved to watch the water respond to things hitting it. And so I think that not enough of us really considered that, because it just does this incredible thing when we hit it, when we drop things into it, and it's really cool, and it definitely will fulfill some people's sensory needs because it's just really cool. And the other thing is, most of us really don't notice it. I know that I don't unless I'm down under the water at about 6 feet, and that's where my ears will start to feel the pressure. But for people with autism who really tend to seek that type of pressure, for a lot of our kids, we use pressure vests or weighted vests. They just kind of gravitate towards that type of feeling. So if they've had an experience in a pool, say with their parents, you had a really great day, the whole family was there swimming together, and they experience the pressure that their body feels. And when they go underneath, all those sensory noises and sounds from the outside world are now muted. It's really a peaceful place to be. But if you do not know how to swim, it could also be quite tragic and devastating. The other thing is that kids with autism, and some adults with autism as well, have a really hard time generalizing skills. So you may put them in a swim class and you think, okay, they're doing pretty good. I encourage you to take them into another body of water. Maybe it's a lake, maybe it's another pool, maybe it's the ocean, if that's what you have in your area. But have them experience other forms of water so that you could see, okay, so are they taking that skill that they learned in that pool into this pool? Because I have heard several reports actually where parents have lost their child to drowning, and the parent says, my kid had swim lessons. They know how to swim. But we know even when it comes to education, academics, reading and writing, it's not uncommon at all for a teacher to report that a child is reading in the classroom, but yet the mom says, I don't know what you're talking about, because they don't do that at home. So we want to make sure that we pay very special attention and actively engage in the swimming lesson. If you could be there in the water with them when they get the swimming lesson, that would be fabulous. But if you can't, because some swim schools don't like that, I encourage you to be in the area so that you can watch. How is the teacher teaching my child how to swim? So that you can then take those same skills into another pool and make sure that they in fact are carrying over those skills. And barriers, we have to have barriers. If you have doors on your house, which I assume that you do, you want to have door alarms on those doors. Do not ever underestimate the ability of a child to figure out how to get outside. I have talked to many parents who have multiple locks on doors and say that their kids are like Houdini, the magician. They are able to figure out all sorts of things. And, a lot of times parents of kids who maybe don't verbally communicate or are really struggling in school with the academics think that they'll never be able to figure out how to get out of the house. That cannot be further from the truth. So you want to make sure that you not only have the proper locks, because you want that, but you want to make sure that you have those door alarms, and not just the one that will go off like when you first open the door, but it needs to stay on, because you may be on the other side of the house. Your child gets outside. There could be a pool in your backyard. There could be a pool in the neighbor's yard. Because the one thing with kids with autism, they don't really tend to mind whose pool it is. If their focus is on getting into a pool, they'll go into a pool. I've actually talked to emergency medical services people, firemen, firewomen, who say that they get a call at 911 and the child is in a neighbor's pool without any clothes on. Because sometimes we teach kids, you don't go swimming with your clothes on. You're going to have your bathing suit on. So don't ever think that you think your kid's following the rules, but that doesn't mean that the neighbor's pool is totally off limits. And then where I live, there happens to be a tremendous amount of lakes, retention ponds, canals, and literally from my home, there is a pool in the backyard. There's a canal about 50 yards away. There's a lake about 100 yards away. And there's a canal probably about a quarter mile down the road, another one, a larger one. And the ocean is a couple miles away. And so my son, we had to make sure that we fully protected him. Yes, he got swimming lessons at an early age, but we also made sure that we had those alarms on the doors, that we had the gates around, you have special fencing for around the pool. So if you have the fencing around the pool, make sure that the gate on it has a self-latching gate, because sometimes, tragically, someone doesn't shut the gate and the child is able to get into the pool. There's also these really cool alarms that float on the surface of the pool. So if you have a pool and maybe you don't want to, or maybe you're renting the home and you're not able to put up the fencing around the pool, you could put one of these alarms that floats in the water. And then when the water gets disturbed, the alarm goes off. We always want to make sure that we have all those safeguards in place. And, so many of us, we need a break too, right? So maybe we call grandparents or the babysitter and we have them come over and keep an eye on our kids so that we can go have dinner. Very sadly, I hear of children dying when a loved one is there to watch them because they're not as in tune with their needs as you are as their parent. Actually, just last week, we had a 6-year-old boy who died close by where I live, and it was his grandmother who was keeping care of him. And sadly now, that grandma is going to feel a tremendous amount of guilt. And we don't want that for any of our family members. So we can't just depend upon the adult supervision that we want to have, but everybody has that moment where you turn for a second. Maybe you're answering the front door. Don't ever leave your kids in a bathtub. Because when we talk about answering the front door, we've had situations where children are in the bathtub, the door rings, maybe it's Amazon. You go to the door thinking that your kids are safe in the water. And you guys know when you have a delivery at the front door, you have to sign for it, maybe have a conversation. It literally takes seconds for children to die from drowning. Don't ever leave your children in the bathtub, even if you think that they're safe. They can drown in 2 inches of water. Kids can drown in literally this much water. So you want to make sure that you have all those safeguards in place. And my organization, what we do, and I encourage you all, no matter where you live, to reach out to organizations in your area. The World Health Organization has come out with a report most recently that really talks about global impact to drowning, especially on children, and how there are really great ways that we can not only work as families, but we can work together as communities on how to decrease drowning. We have actually seen a global reduction in drowning as a whole. Now, when they talk about drowning as a whole, though, we're also talking about adults. So we've gotten better in boat safety, in making sure that people are in their full capacities as they get behind, the steering wheel of a boat. So we've done a little bit with that because there used to be many more drownings when it came to boating issues. So we've seen some good progress there. But yet, where we've done better there, where the numbers are coming down there, our numbers of children drowning are going up. And back to where I started from, in really looking at autism, we believe that because of the delay in diagnoses of kids with autism, that it might sound really horrific that children with autism drown at a rate 160 times more. We actually believe that figure to be significantly above that 160 times. Because think about the children that we just don't know yet, that they do gravitate towards water. They really don't have great problem-solving skills to be able to figure out how to get to the side of the pool. That they sometimes are Houdinis or have a very limited level of fear in general. How many of you have had children touch the top of the stove because they don't really realize the heat that comes off of that? It's the same thing with water safety. They're not aware of the danger. They're not aware that you can literally lose your life by going into a body of water if you don't know how to swim. So we want to make sure that every possible safeguard that we can have is in place, no matter the age. And I encourage everyone, because I've met several adults over the course of really getting into this, which was probably about 7 years ago now, that don't know how to swim. And I always say, you know, you have to be able to have those skills if you are going to help your children if they're in a moment of tragedy. Because talk about tragedy, if you have a child who's struggling in the water, you want to be able to jump in and save them. So this could be a family activity where you all go get swimming lessons together and set up your home with those door alarms, the barriers, making sure, one more thing, that you know CPR, right? So how to respond. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm in a situation that I am freaking out, no matter what it is, all of those processes that I normally use in my head that help me with problem solving, those go out the window. So you do not want to think, oh, I got this, I will know, I will figure it out if I have to resuscitate my child during a drowning. Do not wait for that to happen. Make sure that you get CPR lessons. Contact your local fire department, fire rescue, police. There are some really amazing organizations out there, the Red Cross, that provide swimming. There are really great first responders out there that offer free instruction to families on CPR and what to do in that emergency situation. The Red Cross is another really wonderful global resource that's out there. So I encourage you guys to reach out to them, find out what they have to offer, how to get connected with them. And if you are someone who really can't afford to be able to get those types of lessons, there are so many free options for you. And I'm sure that the Red Cross will be able to help give you some guidance so that you can get the tools that you need to save a life, whether that's your child's life, the neighbor's life, because we don't want anybody to be a bystander of an event like this and not know what to do and how to assist. We can really make a truly enormous impact on drowning across this globe if we all know a little bit more about the dangers, the extreme draw to water that many people with autism just have naturally, and know how to respond during that stressful situation so that we can help save a life. Drowning is preventable. We just have to know a little bit more about it.